every pharmaceutical company had cannabis medicine for men who was from this medicine. This was something that everyone has used throughout the history of the world. And it is actually not a drug because it does not have a toxic level. So I would like you to check the history. Every single pharmaceutical company had cannabis as its medicine. It is needed. And the Bible tells us, all the herbs are meant for the service of man. Do you believe me?
Do I believe?
That is my question.
I'm sorry? Do I believe what?
The final question was, do you believe her? So if you would like to address
I can tell you I've done the research, but we no longer use opioid. We don't chew opium just to get the results of that. You know, we now have morphine. And now you go to the hospital and the doctor to get those things. So why is there a need to smoke marijuana? There is no proven benefit to smoke marijuana.
All right. We are going to move on to our next question. A reminder, we want questions, not comments. We have such a wealth of knowledge up here. So if you have a question, if you want to direct that to one of our panel.
This is going to primarily be directed to the sheriff. I think most people in here are aware that there is a lot of cartel activity in the United States at the moment. And a lot of their profit and their ability to buy weapons and have a presence in our country has to do with their sales of marijuana. And we have the ability to regulate and tax this. So, in the end, would you rather like tens of billions of dollars go to drug lords in South America, or would you rather have them used to be treating addiction, look at education, and generally just like increase our awareness of what the substance actually does? Because that's what we're not doing that.
Let me tell you what we found out about the cartels. They can adjust a business model as quick as any Fortune 500 company out there. And what they rely on is America being addicted. What we have seen is we have seen a shift from cocaine to methamphetamine, and now they're switching to heroin. A couple of years ago, yes, 80% of their profits still came from marijuana. But as that shifts and the addiction grows in America, because it's growing, and what we're doing is not as effective as it should be by a long shot. But as the addiction grows, they will simply move into other areas of controlled substance. And if we're kind of plowing the field, so to speak, by allowing access to our young adults that are very susceptible to have that addiction, then the cartel will be fine with that, because they will supply the back end of whatever that substance becomes. And I don't want to stretch this out too long, but what we found out about people who are addicts, any substance will do. Once you're on that road to addiction, they will switch, and it's a really sad thing to see. If you think I'm saying that in judgment of them, I am not. It is a sad, horrible thing for them to see. And as harsh as the criminal justice system can be at times, that addiction is much harsher on them.
Thank you, Sheriff. All right, and a reminder, brief question.
Jennifer Nicole Foster, Sheriff Van Duncan. And I commend you for your stance on addiction. That's absolutely right. My question to you is, I think you've got false premises in there, because cannabis really doesn't lead to addiction, and that if cannabis were actually restored and the law wasn't criminalized, then it would be more honest drug policy, like Mr. Scales was saying, and then people might respect the law more when you're talking about opioids and heroin, because it's a legal fiction that cannabis is a drug. So my question to you is, I understand what you said about social costs. Do you really understand the social cost of locking people up for this and how much it destroys their lives?
Yes, ma'am.
No, I don't think you do. I got locked up for a year. The question is, do you really understand the social cost of locking people up? It destroys their lives, their employment, their mental health. It takes a whole year out of your life to go through court for something that you never should have been in jail for. So that's the other side.
Okay, and let me respond to this kind of without, I don't want to ratchet it up emotionally. What I will tell you is, yes, I do understand those costs of incarceration and watching that break families up. What I will tell you and what I see every day, we will have to agree to disagree on whether or not marijuana leads young people into that road of addiction, because I watch it happen every day. in our high schools and with our kids. And I talk with those parents and I talk with those kids one-on-one. What I'm going to tell you is, as harsh as the criminal justice system can be, nothing is more harsh on an individual than an addiction that sometimes either intensifies a mental illness or can even lead to a mental illness, because it checks that person out of life. And we're not just talking about working. We're talking about family. We're talking about finding success. We're talking about what successful people do that have a joyful life. It checks them out of that. And that is harsher than anything I've witnessed.
Can I speak to that briefly? If I could speak to that briefly, a lot of this argument is tied to this gateway theory, that somehow we're going to be that if we make marijuana legal for adults to possess, that somehow children are going to start being addicted to marijuana. I mean, to marijuana and to other drugs. And I just don't think that link has been made. And what we're doing is we're lying to children when we tell them that. We're lying to children when we say, hey, stay away from marijuana because it's going to lead you to heroin. When over half of Americans over the age of 12 have used marijuana. And if it really led to all these problems, if it really led to all this addiction, there would be piles of addicts. There would be, and if it was a deadly substance, there would be bodies.
Folks, I don't know if you realize that there are piles of addicts,
Yes.
and there are bodies every day.
That's plainly not true.
It
There's
is true.
a very infinitesimal fraction of our population that's addicted to drugs. And you're conflating this argument that, I mean, I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree on that.
We will on that as well.
Do you have numbers on how many people are addicted? What percentage
Not
of the
addicted,
population?
but we are getting together the numbers on heroin overdose deaths just in this county.
What about marijuana overdose deaths?
Here's the issue, guys. Addiction is addiction. And not everybody, and don't confuse what I'm saying, not everybody that smokes marijuana, especially if they start when they're an adult, the chances of them becoming addicted and moving on to a harder drug is pretty low. But if you got kids that have a preformed brain, now this is the science of it, and this is where I ask you to go out and research it. The chances of them are about 1 in 6. It does different things to a preformed adolescent brain. And once those kids that become adults start down that road of addiction, it is a hard thing to fix.
Sheriff, thank you. We're going to move on to one more question back here. And then over here, if y'all have no idea where I am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Director, Sheriff Duncan. At the outset, you made the comment that if we were having a discussion about disparity in criminal justice, you would be interested in having that discussion. As an elected officer of the law, our sheriff, why shouldn't we be taking the lead on addressing these disparities in arrest and conviction? It sounds to me that there is more of a vested interest in keeping this prohibition in effect because it feeds the beast, which is the prison industrial complex. Because if that was not the case, then a lot of you all would be out of work. So economic mechanism.
I apologize, I couldn't hear a lot of that.
Do you want to give just a very succinct, the last sentence?
Yeah.
Is this more about the health and well-being of our citizens, or is it about keeping certain people employed, i.e. the courts and the law enforcement system? Because I have yet to hear anything that would persuade me to believe that this is more about feeding the hungry beast, which is the prison industrial complex.
You know, and I'm going to be honest with you, that's offensive to me. I do what I do because I care about kids and I care about y'all and I care about our community. If I could work myself out of a job and we could have less law enforcement, I would love it. But what I'm going to tell you, go talk to your service providers, not just law enforcement. Go talk to your nurses in the ER. Go talk to your EMS folks. Go talk to your fire folks. Ask them what the problem is right now, and they'll tell you. And I'm just being honest. I appreciate your question, but I mean that if I even thought about keeping that going to keep people in work, that'd make me a horrible person, and I'm just not.
Thank you, Sheriff. All right, now just to kind of diversify the voices we're hearing from here, can we take a question directed to our pro side? Does anyone have another question directed to the pro side? Ben can take it, he's ready. All right. Ms. Fisher.
Hi, I have a question. I'm one of these people who falls square in the middle of this debate, and my question always goes to, how do we manage that piece of the kid brain, where we know brain development, it's tricky with kids, and we know that so many substances they put in their body affect their brains differently. And I don't know that we have a lot of research yet on what that looks like. So when we talk about legalizing marijuana, how could we regulate it such that we protect developing brains for as long as possible while allowing adults to make different choices and decriminalizing it for adults?
The path is there, if you will, with alcohol. I think that one of the things that we're going to have to do is stop looking at non sequitur arguments and letting people use our children. It's always mom, children, and apple pie when it comes to making decisions about developmental aspects of children's brains. We don't allow children to drink alcohol. I hope not. I was on the ABC board. At least that was one of the tenets of state law and the general statutes. You don't let that happen. So the same thing with marijuana. We're not advocating that we start children smoking ganja by the time they're able to stand up and crib. So let's not demonize. Let's not be like the Schaefer Commission and the Anslingers. Let's use our intellect. We were gifted with that, and it's time to start putting together some solutions, because this war on drugs and this big prison industrial complex is making a caste system out of brown and black people. It is devastating. The sheer numbers of it has only, when you see it, and we just got Mission Hospital to agree to drop the box that asks about employment. It's a tremendous problem, and it's one that's going to break the backs of the taxpayers. So I would say to you that in much the same way that we regulate alcohol and cigarettes, we have a path there. One of the things that we're doing is making, we're so punitive about it. We're not looking at it from the standpoint of scientific data. It's always about emotionalism and being punitive. So that's my answer.
And I would just add to that,
A little bit, because I'm not asking about it like that either. I think we're an utter failure in enforcing both bans on tobacco use and alcohol use for kids too. I mean, we failed at it across the board. And I think that making poor distinctions is totally a problem, which is what I stood up and said to Bill Bennett when he started this war on drugs in 1986.
If we can give someone else the opportunity to
But I'm
ask.
just saying, I still think we have an issue about how do we keep kids safe.
well, one thing we have to do is something different than what we're doing now, is what I would say. That right now what we're doing, there's marijuana all over the schools. And because it's completely unregulated, and it's completely, it's in the hands of criminals who don't check IDs. If we were to actually regulate it like tobacco, I mean, I hear you say that it's an abject failure, but smoking rates among kids is infinitesimal. It's just not cool to smoke. And if we took the same approach with marijuana and that we take with alcohol and tobacco, education is what we need to do. Prohibiting the adult use does nothing to educate kids on it. When they see that 480,000 people die a year from alcohol, and it's legal, or excuse me, from tobacco and it's legal, 88,000 die directly from alcohol, and it's still legal. That sends the wrong message to our kids. If we're gonna, and then we have a substance over here that's never killed anyone ever, then we're not being rational. And I want to protect our kids just as much as the next guy. And what we're doing now is not working. The status quo is not working. And so that's why I believe we need to change.
Thank you. Thank you for the debate. My question is general critique. It seems like there's some current information that the whole panel isn't aware of. With one big obvious thing that sticks out is that doctors haven't been prescribing smoking marijuana when they absolutely have for chemo patients and things where it's about therapy. And the other is about, for the pro side, the critique would be that you're not coming with enough arguments based in science where there's some current studies showing the correlation between mental illnesses and the addiction is more about the similarities between the genetics and the genetics that those people have that are going to be predisposed to that and not necessarily the causes of it. And also that the DEA, are you aware that the DEA and the federal government is rescheduling it away from Schedule 1 substance? And what factors does that bring on the local level for the punitive stuff that the young lady mentioned, and just the devastation that it's meant for so many people? You can't bring up a drug test when that's from the insurance companies for their workers' comp. And that's because of insurance stuff and because it's illegal. So that's all it is. How can you justify? That's my question. How can you justify the devastation that it's meant for humanity?
Is that a question?
If you're talking about, and the only thing that I picked up was real clear was a question about drug testing and why would a employer do that? Well,
keeping it illegal based on that. How can you justify that? Because if you were setting the law, you were the sheriff of this county. If you're setting the standard, if you say, we're good because these people are good, these are tax-paying citizens, we're not going to make life more punitive on them. It's called attitude time from the top down. And that's where you stand in these things.
Thank you. I think we're going to just take one more question. Sheriff, did you want to?
I do. I don't think anybody out here wants somebody driving a vehicle, especially if they're at work and they're driving a tractor and trailer or a delivery van driving high. I don't think anybody thinks that's a good idea. So there are some very valid things and people using equipment and machinery that are, I don't think you'd want your law enforcement officers out here carrying a gun high. We drug test our folks as well. So I think it's very valid to do that. As far as being punitive, I think you've heard a lot of discussion and you hadn't really heard me argue against moving to less or moving towards some decriminalization of user amounts for adults. I mean, I think that's where we're moving as a country. But remember, we're talking about wholesale legalization of marijuana. And there is a lot of unintended costs that have come in the legal states around people working and issues that involve people just checking out and staying high all the time. And if you're asking me personally, no, I don't think that's a real positive thing for us as a society.
Do you think those costs are outweighed by all the tax revenue that's coming in?
Well, what you're having right now in those legal states is banks will not take their money. So they're having to become cash businesses. So therefore, there's a lot of tax evasion and a lot of opportunity for, and the home invasions and the crime has gone up in those states, or at least in Colorado was the data I looked at, and and also in California, to where you've got suppliers and growers, and because the banks won't take their money and they're dealing in a lot of cash, you've got home invasions, and there's probably also a real significant tax evasion issue there.
But that's not an argument for keeping the status quo.
I don't think you've heard me say we need to keep the status quo.
As far as the drug testing goes, what your drug test does, it tests whether somebody has smoked marijuana in the last 30 days, not whether they're impaired. Nobody wants anybody driving a truck when they're high, that's right. But these drug tests don't measure that. These drug tests are decide whether or not you're a pot smoker. You can be a raving alcoholic and still pass those drug tests. You can take cocaine 2 or 3 days before that drug test and still pass it. But these drug tests, because of the way marijuana stays in the system for so long, it penalizes you for who you are and not what you've done. And that's what bothers me.
For 2 more questions, we're going to take one here, and then we're going to close out with a question from the student.
Thank you so much. This is a question for all members of the panel. I would like to know your individual positions on the morality of the prison for profit system and whether you support prisons for profit or prisons for punishment. Thank you.
And I'm sure you all can answer that very simple question in 10 seconds or less.
I do not support prisons for profit. That is one of the reasons that you have so many people who are in the prison systems, is they're being used as free labor. You find a lot of buildings going up who do nothing but process people into that prison system. Something similar to the new building that we got here. You saw in Ferguson, Missouri, where they take very poor people, put them in prison, find them, incarcerate them, literally 3 times having marijuana. You face very stiff structured sentencing, and it makes almost like a habitual felon out of you. You're put into a prison system where you make goods and services that are sold in the free market, and folks make profit off of it, and it does nothing but feed the system, and our legislators are just as culpable as they can be for promoting that. And then we have local prison industrial complex that are part and parcel, and a lot of people are gaining employment off that. So I'm opposed to the for-profit prison and the penal system, the prison industrial complex. If you're going to punish people, then punish them, but don't let anybody make profit off of them. If you want to work them, let them know and leave them alone.
I don't have anything to add there.
No, I don't support contracting out. There's certain things that the government does better than the private sector. I don't think the prisons ought to fall under the private sector. No.
I don't have anything to add.
Thank you all. All right, and we're going to close out with one final question from a student at Asheville High School.
So even though tobacco is legalized and it's more prevalent than ever, chewing tobacco, smoking a cigarette, electronic cigarettes, tobacco usage rates are at an all-time low due to the fact that the government launches lots of national campaigns against tobacco use, and such legislation has been passed that cigarettes cannot be advertised on TV. So would you say that so if you were to legalize marijuana, would you include part of government control being passing legislation like that makes it illegal to advertise recreational use on TV, or to have law, or would you say that one good way to control possible overdose and addiction rates is to launch national campaigns?
Well, I think, if I may, I don't think any drug, prescription drug, marijuana, tobacco, I don't think anything should be advertised. I don't think that anybody is their own doctor, and the fact that we can all go to our own doctor and say, well, I saw this drug on TV and I think I need it. We don't have that degree, we don't know. I don't think any kind of substance should be advertised on TV.
One of the things that we need to do is start using the brain that God gave us. What is happening is that drug companies do advertise. You ever saw Pfizer, Glaxo, Wellcome on television? They do advertise. Brewing companies and so forth are the prime. They are the prime lobbyists against the legalization of marijuana. So you need to understand that in order to control marijuana, there's going to have to be massive education campaigns, regulations against advertising on television. And with the taxation of the dollars that come with that, you can institute best practices, tweak it, provide health care that's adequate, education that's adequate about the ills of marijuana, just like you do tobacco. So, yes, so I would regulate advertisement of marijuana, even though it were legalized.
I would. I think there's a very valid argument to be made about taking marijuana down the path of tobacco, but here's the difference. Everybody agreed that tobacco was killing people, and everybody agreed that tobacco was a bad thing, and we needed to tax it, take that revenue generated, and turn around and make it a very uncool and unpopular thing to do. But here's the difference. The folks who are pushing for the legalization of marijuana do not believe marijuana is a bad thing. They do not believe we need to send the message that it can be dangerous and lead to addiction. So I think that's an argument to get the legalization, but I don't in fact think that's what will take place.
I would just say that, that how legalization looks is really what this conversation should be about, rather than whether it should happen, because I think it's going to happen. And I think all these issues are things that should be discussed, and anybody that thinks that they know what the future would be like if marijuana is legal, they're kidding themselves. All of us are going to have to take steps and tweak things. The things that are happening in Colorado that you're seeing, that you're complaining about, all can be addressed. And going back to criminalizing simple possession of marijuana wouldn't solve any of those problems, but would just recreate the old problems that we had before. I'd be in favor of massive public education campaigns against the use of marijuana. I don't think children should use marijuana. I'd be in favor of a law that says that all packaging has to be just a brown paper bag with just a label on it that says what's in it, what the constituent cannabinoids and the relative percentages, and maybe a big warning that says if you smoke this and you're a kid, you may become addicted to heroin. I'd be fine with that kind of thing.
They're recording, so we got that.
I'd be fine with that level of regulation. What I don't like is this current prohibition, which absolutely prohibits it for all use by anyone, when we know that responsible adult use is not only possible, but happens every day all across this country. We have Nobel Prize winners that use marijuana. Like she was saying, we have Olympic athletes. Not just an Olympic athlete, the most decorated Olympic athlete in the world. Okay? We've got our last president, our current president, not only smoked marijuana, but smoked cocaine as well.
You're welcome to finish your thought.
That's fine. I probably did finish it.
Thank you, sir. All right, one more round of applause for all of our debaters.
Good job.
I'm going to hand it over to Chloe, who will talk to you about our jurors. But before we go, I just want to thank our timers, who are brilliant and have amazing concentration and actually know what they're doing. Joshua Hyman and Madeline Wolf. Of the Women's Dykeman Foundation, who just worked so hard to do 1,000 different cool things in the community, and this being one of them. And especially Chloe Dennison, who told me what to do and is brilliant and worked so hard to bring all 4 of these events about.
So now that the official debating has ended, we're going to turn it over to our panel of 5 chief judges to determine the outcome of the debate. Now, these are 5 students who are varsity members at the Asheville High School Speech and Debate team. They have been competing for several years, and they are all incredibly experienced. They are not going to be judging this debate based on their own personal opinions. They're strictly going to be judging it based on the arguments made and what they ultimately thought was the most important issues of the round, based on the evidence and other issues that they thought was most prevalent. So I will turn over to our first judge.
Hey everybody, my name is Stephen Byes. I'm a senior here at the high school, and for the sake of our debaters, I'll be addressing the comments to them. So first off, thank you so much, because we hear so many live, kind of unjustified claims in this debate, and I think you guys did the exact opposite. So many of your points were so well researched, you had statistics on nearly everything, and I think if nothing else, you guys have changes from a conversation that's no longer about pop smoking hippies versus big pharma. It's about real people and the effects of marijuana, and I think thank you all for that. Now, I'd also like to say that you guys did so many things well. So with the research, and I think you have changed minds here tonight. You have given so much more research, more thought to this, and that's really an excellent thing to see in these debates. I also judged The first debate about reparations in Asheville, and I got to say this was so much more even than that. It was legitimate back and forth, and there was things and points that were legitimate on both sides. So now I will move into my voter issues, and I'm voting on these because I believe this is what really decided the debate for the night. And the first one of those is the status quo, and this came in again and again. What we're doing now is wrong, and you guys seem to agree with that across the board. Now, it seems to me that rather than a direct about-based media take a small turn one side way towards either education or towards legalization, but because both of you guys agreed that the status quo was a problem in the first place and that we needed to be changing something, that first voting issue was kind of a wash for me, so it ended up even on both sides. Now, my second issue is where this debate often turns to, either the financial costs or the social costs. So first I'll be addressing the financial costs. And it seems to me that the debate essentially came down to the tax revenue that Mr. Scales mentioned in his first speech, to the productivity loss that we can't really account for, that Ms. Stockman and Mr. Duncan talked about in their own speeches. But for me, because Mr. Scales had so much research on this and provided actual statistics, it seems to me that the financial costs do indeed point towards the legalization for medical marijuana, or for legalizing marijuana. But now the debate comes down to social costs, and that's really where I'm going to be doing most of my judging on, because at the end of the day, this is where lives are going to be changed. So the first point you guys brought up was African Americans, and the statistic that you provided, Ms. Williams, was absolutely horrifying. The rates that blacks are incarcerated over whites. But to me, that's not a marijuana-specific issue. That is across the board. I've heard that used for cocaine and heroin, and like Mr. Duncan countered, it is an issue that is rooted in our justice system rather than marijuana itself. Now, the second part of this was the gateway drug intervention, and this, again, was kind of watching because you guys brought up some points about how marijuana itself is not addictive, and it seems like the medical literature does indeed point that way, but you guys also talked about how it has been used in some instances as a gateway drug. So again, kind of a wash, but then it came down to children, and Mr. Scales made an excellent point that people are stoking this fire, and we again and again see children brought up as kind of fodder for this conversation. But when we look at the fire that Mr. Scales pointed to, and we see that there actually is a fire with what you guys brought up, ignoring that there's a problem won't solve it. Because there were statistics that you guys brought up that were never counted on your side that pointed towards children being altered, their academic learning and their long-term memory. And that's a crucial point. So yes, they were stoking this fire, but if there really is an issue there, then we cannot continue to let it go unaddressed. So for that reason, the social costs of this debate really went to the con side. So then, again, as I said, I have a hard time choosing between this, but because I think social costs matter more in the debate about marijuana, I eventually voted con.
All right, my name is Lizzie Griefer, and I'm a sophomore here at the high school. So to move on to the points of today's debate, first I'd like to congratulate all of the debaters for an excellent, well-researched debate, which you should all be very proud of. So moving on to the points that were made today. So first I want to look towards the points that I think the Pro made very well. I would like to thank them for informing all of us about the history of marijuana law enforcement and how it has hurt many social groups.
If cannabis were actually restored and the law wasn't criminalized, then it would be more honest drug policy, like Mr. Scales was saying, and then people might respect the law more when you talk about opioids and heroin, because it's a legal fiction that cannabis is a drug. So my question to you is, I understand what you said about social costs. Do you really understand the social cost of locking people up for this and how much it destroys their lives?
Yes, ma'am.
No, I don't think you do. I got locked up for a year. The question is, do you really understand the social cost of locking people up? It destroys their lives, their employment.
The historical injustice that you continually brought up. Although the con side tried to point out that this might be a little bit irrelevant, as Stephen said that this was an overreaching issue, I felt that this definitely had some weight because you provided solvency for an issue that has been going on for so long and has, as Stephen said, horrifying statistics that show that how much of a higher rate the African Americans are incarcerated. So I definitely bought this and had to look to the pro side for this argument because it provided solvency. Secondly, when comparing the social harms on the con side versus the economic benefits on the pro side, I had to look to that because, the one death that I saw on the con side simply wasn't enough to defeat the $150 million worth of tax revenue brought to Colorado. So for those reasons, I voted pro.
My name is Caleb Walker-Wilson. I'm a senior at the high school and I do congressional debate. So first of all, just thanks a lot. One thing that I really enjoyed about this was it humanized everyone affected by this, whether it's law enforcement, people that are incarcerated, users, people who are against it. So I really appreciate the humanizing voice and the statistics and way you presented your arguments. So great job for that. I have 7 voter issues because a lot of opinions were tossed out. Most of them were backed up. So the first one will be race relations, racially charged policy, and then human rights. This one I'm giving to the pro because they were able to prove that the policy through citing the stuff about the 37 the Tax Act, and then also the drug war with Nixon and his domestic aid. That was very telling in that we were dismissing as a nation the Schaefer Act and the studies that had been done and opting for a racially charged policy. So there, in terms of race and human rights, that goes to the pro. Next is states who have legalized it, what we can gather from them. Both sides presented several arguments. However, the pro did get my vote because of statistics. In Colorado, the con cited a lot of anecdotal studies about a woman jumping off a building, which is fine, but if that's backed up by statistics, it holds much more weight. Therefore, the statistics do point pro. Next, about whether marijuana is addictive and whether it leads to addiction. So that is a drop in mine. Is a very important issue, but because pro cited that there's a 9% addictive rate or dependency rate, similar to caffeine, but then also the con brought up that 1/6 of youth who try marijuana develop a dependency. So therefore, I don't know which one of those statistics is correct, so that's a drop. Next we have that is alcohol and tobacco actually well regulated, which I agree with my colleague Miksa was an incredibly creative point, and that falls on the con. Because of the stats we were able to bring up about the rates that outlets of alcohol and tobacco in the county distribute to minors, which is appalling, that goes to the con. However, if the pro had brought up what the question was asked by the Asheville High student about the advertising campaigns, that would have been a drop as well. But because the pro did not, that goes to the con. Now, secondly, the point that hard users of drugs, most of them started with using marijuana, the gateway argument, that also goes to the con. Pretty much because the pro did not directly address this and did not have a counter argument to that the hard drug users in our country started with marijuana. Now, secondly, what is actually being done in this resolution, and whether that is what the con says is wholesale, flipping of the switch, reversing prohibition, and just having a weed free-for-all, for instance, which the pros have approved was not the case. And then because alcohol and tobacco are still regulated, even if not so well in Montgomery County, that goes to the pro because, Sheriff Duncan, you're right that maybe we do need regulations, but regulation is what's coming with the pro side. So the pro goes there. And next we have, what do we know about it? And both sides, the con brought up that we actually don't know enough about it. We don't know how it affects the brain after 25, because it's not fully developed. But then the con suggested in the Schaefer report, and then after the 20 years and 20,000 studies. And so that for me is a drop as well, because there's no way to prove that those 20,000 studies were effective and bring us all the knowledge, but there's also no way to prove that we don't have all the knowledge, just because there's not a consensus. So that was also a drop. So the pro won 3 of my voter issues, 2 of them were ties, and the con won 2. So therefore I vote drop. Thank you.
Well, we're at the end of the 3-debate series, and I've just got to ask you, if you like what you saw, put your hands together. Let's get this. You know, I'm beginning to think only in Asheville. My call is to organizations like the League of Women Voters and other folks to continue the tradition now of rational debate on the issues between matched sides, and these 4 people are incredible. So I gotta give it to all of them. But right now, I want you to give one more consideration to your brochure, to the Wilma Diamond Legacy. And now I'd like to invite two members of the Asheville High SILSA Speech and Debate program to come up. And actually, I think they're going to toot their own horn a little bit. They should, because you got to hear what they've accomplished. So thank you very much for coming, and at the end of their remarks, at the end of the evening. Thank you. And here they come.